morning, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we get right into it, I do just want to welcome everybody. Thank you for showing up and showing out for another population-focused learning series. Before we get into our presentation, I do just want to go over some housekeeping. So the bathrooms will be out through that single door right behind you and then to your left. We ask that you please use that single door or the other single door and not the double doors where the exit sign is. We are recording and those doors are loud and we don't want a bunch of inaudible noise as we record this presentation. There is a QR code in your packet. Form. Please fill those out at the end of the presentation. We appreciate and we value all your feedback and we do go over it so that way we can continue these series and continue our education. Please help yourself to the coffee, cookies, water over to the side on your left. At any point in the presentation, if you do need to step out, please go ahead and do so. Let's get right into it. I want to welcome Stanley Frankart, our presentator for today. He is a dear friend of mine and he has some energy for y'all today. And I know we are going to learn, but we're going to make it fun. So welcome, Stanley.
All right, well, good morning, everybody. I was told that I did not need a microphone. Can everybody hear me? Okay, awesome. They said my voice was loud enough as it was this morning so that I did not need a microphone. I just first want to start by thanking Miss James, Miss Smith, and StarkMHAR as a family for having this, right? Let's give it up for them, right? Phenomenal work. I am so honored and thrilled to be here in First Christian. Let's give it up for First Christian for hosting. And last but not least, I'd be amiss if I didn't thank my beautiful wife, who allows me the privilege to do these kinds of things throughout the duration of our marriage. So if you can, just give my wife a round of applause. She really is the better half of me. And so I'd be amiss if I didn't thank her this morning. And then last but not least, my daughter, who dressed me this morning. She asked me this morning specifically, we went a weekend without AC. And so she said, Dad, do you have to wear long sleeves today? And I said, well, honey, why you got something in mind? And she said, I got a shirt for you, Daddy. So she gave me this shirt that says, hands down, best dad for Father's Day. And she gave me my sneakers. So if you can, give it up for my daughter, Brooklyn. I normally don't show up with a t-shirt under a suit, but for my daughter's sake, I did this morning. I'll circle back to that conversation a little bit later and why that's so important to me. But today we're going to navigate around what being justice involved means and what reentry means for our community and us. Okay? So I want to take a moment, make sure everybody's centered. We're going to have some hard and heavy conversation. Okay? These are realities that are faced every day. And I don't want to be amiss to overlook those realities. There's people who are just as involved in this room who have experienced these things firsthand. And so I want to take a moment just to make sure everybody's centered. I want to make sure you know you have permission to take full care of yourself this morning. If anything gets hard, if anything gets heavy, I give you full autonomy and permission to get up, walk out, take a moment to catch your balance. If you need a shoulder to cry on, I'll be the first to volunteer to give you my shoulder. But I also want to look to our neighbors because it's important that we find healing in our community too. So please take a moment, look at your neighbor, introduce yourself, because if there's some heavy conversation, I want you to be able to lean on your neighbor from time to time. So take a moment, say good morning, great to see you, introduce yourself. Perfect. All right. With no further ado, I want to take a moment. This is a dear friend of mine. This was a state house performance that was done about the importance of trauma-informed lawyering. Sorry, that was hard to say. So this is a dear friend of mine by the name of Alfred Cleveland. He was an exoneree back in 2020 in the height of COVID. He did 25 years wrongfully convicted. 25 years for a crime he did not commit. That's what it means to be wrongfully convicted. And so I want to take a moment and highlight his experience. I think this is going to help us kind of gain some ground. And then we'll go into a little bit of question just to make sure I'm in the room with the right people.
probation, and all the other defendants are getting probation today, so stop stressing. Well,
Yeah.
Are you still taking me out to your night, Daddy?
Yes. As a matter of fact, we're gonna go this weekend. And you can bring 2 friends.
you can take that chain off and give it to your wife now, Mr. Cleveland. You won't be needing that anymore.
What do you mean he won't be needing that?
What are you talking about? You said I was getting probation. 5 other guys in there just got probation for the same thing.
Those 5 other guys didn't have priors either, Mr. Cleveland. Probation's off the table.
Man, this is freaking BS.
Daddy, what's wrong?
No, everything's all right, baby girl. It'll be okay. It's just a little discrepancy.
Look, Mr. Cleveland, you know the drill. You've been through this already. The state has offered you 4 years. Now, I can get you home in 3 and have you back to your family. That's if you are able to give us another $10,000.
Are you serious? Didn't we just give you $7,500?
Yes, you did, but right now, Mr. Cleveland, you need to sign these papers. Your daughter's young. A year after you're home, she won't even know you're gone.
Can't be serious.
I'm very serious. Sign the papers, Mr. Cleveland.
Turn it down a little bit. She gets to sing it pretty loud.
The world's on my back, facing these charges. And we can do the crime. This makes it the hardest. The color of my skin, that makes me a target, baby girl. It's hard to pinpoint when it started, but Dad, you'll be gone. No, you won't listen. I need you to be strong while I'm trapped in the system. Listen, you said you want to be a lawyer. It's something for you. Would you take your client's home reaching for you? Would you listen to a mother's pleas when you know she's stressed out and her son's getting left out to dry? Could you wave his family goodbye and tell him you're going to fight to the end? Could you be upfront and honest with all your clients and break down your client's case to the client's love? Could you be on time for court hearings and break down your client's case to its coherent? Would you be prepared when it's trial time? Or send me down the road where it's count time? But I'm a conscience plea because I was facing 10. Daddy gotta go. It's the life of the kids.
Walking out the door, trying to take control. Family left behind, turning and run. Would she ride for me and would she fight for me? Lord, I don't believe, Lord, you guided me. Lord, you guided me. 'Cause we realize that it's unknown. Every person you can lean on. Through the heartbreak, we remain strong. Your angels, you get us through the storm.
The reason I wanted to play that this morning is to give you an idea of realities that people face in the courtroom. This man has spent 25 years wrongfully convicted for a crime he didn't commit and had to leave a wife, had to leave children, had to leave grandchildren in his absence. So as I said, we're going to have some real and hard, heavy conversations. So before we dive into those conversations and get into our individual exercise, I want to make sure this is an interactive experience because it does impact all of us. But before we do that, I want to take a moment and say, make sure I'm in the room with the right people. How many of us in here work with people on a day-to-day basis? Whether you're an IT or a data specialist, if you're doing the HR work or you're doing computer systems, we all interact with people throughout our day. How many of us are in the social services field? Specifically. Awesome. How many of us in this room would fall into categories of 29 to 34 years old? Okay. Perfect. How many of us would say that we work 2 full-time jobs or more? Okay. How many of us have an annual income of $60,000 or less? Okay. Perfect. I wanted us all to be acknowledging the fact that those are realities. And we all can experience how hard it is, right? To work 2 full-time jobs, to make, $60,000 or less a year. Yeah, it's a real thing. And we'll learn a lot more about how that impacts not only you, but also justice-involved people. Okay? So before we do that, I want to take a moment, do an individual exercise. Each of you should have gotten a piece of paper when you came in this morning. If you can, just hold up your piece of paper to let me know you got one. All right. Perfect. And I want you to think through the people that you know personally who have been justice involved, whether directly or a family member / loved one who's been justice involved. And I want you to think about your current situation, where you're located job-wise, the resources that you have, your relationships, your networks, maybe the community that you're in. And I want you to write a letter of support to encourage that person. I want you to write a letter. And I'll set a little bit of parameters about the person that you're writing, okay? That person has 30 days away from being released. They're coming home in a month. They have no transportation, no essential documents, no phone, and $80 to their name. They've been incarcerated for 10 years from the age of 16 till 26. I'm going to give you 5 minutes to write them a letter of encouragement and support using your resources, your networks, maybe even your job, your community, whatever you can do to support this individual. I want you to give this person hope this morning. I'll give you 5 minutes. So roughly at 10:21, we will reconvene. All right. How many of us found that challenging? Yeah, just a couple of us. Okay, good. That means you got a good resource capital. I appreciate you sharing. Now, anything that you personally are providing this person, if you're giving them a ride, if you're giving them money, ethically, you cannot do that. So cross that off on your letter, please. Ethically, you are not allowed to do that. So cross those things out. If you're giving them a place to stay, please cross that out. If it's somebody that you personally know, because ethically you cannot do that. Three things should have been crossed off if you did have them in your letter. You cannot give that person money. You cannot transport that person personally. And you cannot provide that person a place to live of somebody that's close to you or your own personal residence. Now, how easy was that? Was that easy? Did your letter still find encouragement and support? Do you still give that person hope? Would anybody be willing to share an example of their letter with those things crossed out? Yes, ma'am.
Dear Chris, I do hope that this letter finds you in good health and in good spirit. I hear you're coming home in 30 days. I just want to give you some words of encouragement. I want you to be of good cheer and know that you have a great support system when you come home. I want you to stop by the church and meet with me as soon as you get out. I have a lot of resources I can get you connected with. Be blessed and see you soon.
Thank you. Thank you. Let's give it up for her bravery and courage for sharing. Awesome. That was encouraging. I felt motivated and encouraged by that. Somebody to see when I came home. But I want us to realize, too, that there is some things that we can do within our profession. That the relationships are critical. That Although we may be ethically bound by certain parameters, right? Some of us are because of the National Association of Social Workers, and there's ethics that we have to abide by in order to be social workers. As clinicians in the field, there's ethics that we have to abide by. And so we have to make sure that we're honoring those, but simultaneously providing hope and encouragement. Just going to share a few national statistics. People are sent to jails and prisons 7 million times per year. By year end of 22, 1.9 million people were incarcerated in the United States, specifically a 1% increase from year end 21. Sorry, that says 22. It's supposed to be 21. 650,000 people are released every year from incarceration. 1 in 3 adults have a criminal record. 1 arrest happens every 3 seconds in the United States, accounting for 10.5 million people arrested annually in America. Males account for 93% of the sentenced U.S. population, with 1.1 males sentenced to more than 1 year in state and federal prisons. More than 1% of all U.S. male residents ages 25 to 49 are sentenced to a state or federal prison. Women incarceration rates have increased by 525% from 1981 through 2021. Statistics show the victims of crimes would much rather have alternatives to incarceration. 70% or more, some of the studies said, are in favor of alternatives to incarceration. If you're in this room this morning, how many of us know there's a better way than locking people up? There's a lot of things out there that are a lot more expedient in producing the results that we are looking for than incarceration. Now, I do understand there are certain crimes that accounts for that. And I don't want to be naive to those situations, right? But I also want to acknowledge the fact that people are way more overly incarcerated than incarcerated as in terms of being punishable as a consequence. Okay? They are way more overly incarcerated. State statistics. So we talked about a nationwide issue. We're going to make this specific to us Ohioans, okay? How many of us are born and raised in Ohio? Okay, cool. We got any Michigan people in here? I just want to make sure before. Okay, good. I was just going to say, after this, you have to leave. I appreciate you being here. It's no longer for you. Ohio incarcerates people at a rate of 659 people per 100,000, while the U.S. rate of incarceration is 664 people per 100,000. Guess what that means, y'all? Ohio is incarcerating people almost as fast and as vast as the United States itself. You say, Stan, what's the incarceration rate? Well, it refers to the proportion of people who are currently in prison or jail compared to the total adult population. So we're looking at this over the entirety of the United States. 664 per 100,000. When we look at it in the entirety of the state of Ohio, it is 659 per 100,000 people in the state of Ohio. The next highest rate of incarceration in any other nation, we're talking about another country, is 129 people per 100,000. Ohio incarcerates people more than any other country by itself. Ohio. We're just talking Ohio. That includes the United Kingdom, Canada, and I don't know why my E dropped off of France, but France. Combined. 71,000 Ohio residents are incarcerated as of today. Just right now. In this moment, 71,000. 95% of people incarcerated in Ohio will come home. And this is just state penitentiary, 71,000, by the way. We're not talking local county jails. 13% of Ohio's incarcerated population is 55 years of age and older. We're talking about a high vulnerable population here, right? 55 years of age and older. For some of us, that's our grandmother, right? For some of us, that's us, right? Here's the just scale of what we're talking about as far as incarceration rates. This is Ohio in comparison to countries. This, folks, should be alarming. This should be alarming. We should have red flags up saying, hey, something isn't right here. Literally, more than 3 countries combined. State statistics. Each year, 150,000 different people are booked in local county jails in Ohio. Ohio releases roughly 314,000 men and 102,000 women each year from state prisons and local jails. Black people in Ohio are incarcerated at a rate 5.5 times higher than white people. Simply because the color of my skin, I am 5.5 more times likely to be incarcerated than my white brothers and sisters. Let's just talk about Stark County, okay? We're talking about Ohio. Now we're talking about Stark County. How many of us serve, work, live, do life in Stark County? Awesome. I was going to say, if you're in this room, you should probably have somewhere with all about Stark County. Stark County has not updated their prison and jail statistics since 2017. That, number one, should be an issue. Why are we not having data? Why are we not producing data? What's going on that the data is not being shared? In 2015, 3,412 people were I have to go back that far because we don't have any statistics for anything else. 3,412 people were released back to Stark County, but only 564 people were served through reentry services. This is a 2,700 person gap. 2,700 people fell through the cracks somewhere. I'm thankful and grateful that we have a wonderful panel discussion of people who are bridging that gap, who are serving in those capacities and are trying to make an impact so those 2,700 people who fell through the cracks in 2015 don't have to fall through the cracks. The Ohio Department of Rehabilitation and Corrections 2016 state that Stark County has a 36.3% recidivism rate. If you're coming home from incarceration, you are 36% more likely to go back to prison. If I was a gambling man, this would be a little bit concerning for me. I may start looking at this and saying, hey, what's going on? So you say, Stan, why does this even matter? Who cares, right? Well, I'm glad you asked. 416,000 men and women are released from incarceration each year in Ohio. Incarcerated people are almost 10 times more likely to be homeless than the general public. 10 times more likely to be homeless. You say, Stan, I hear you, but that doesn't matter to me. Okay, cool. Let's keep going. National research suggests that up to 15% of incarcerated people experienced homelessness in the year before admission to prison. 15% of folks going to prison were already homeless before they went to prison. We still, in this state and in this country, think that prison and incarceration is an answer to homelessness. That's what this is saying. They were homeless a year before anyway. At least they get 3 hots in a cot. How many of us have said that? Let's keep it real. Okay, good. I'm glad. I was gonna call you on the cut. No, I was playing. People who have been to prison just once experience homelessness at a rate of nearly 7 times higher than the general public. We already have a housing issue. We already have a housing crisis. I could talk to you about that in a myriad of details later. But let's just say it's already an issue. It's 7 times more of an issue for people who are coming home from prison. But people who have been incarcerated more than once, it's already 36% more likely I'm going back. If I've been to prison more than once, I'm 13 times more likely than the general public to experience homelessness. 13 times more likely. In other words, people who have been incarcerated multiple times are almost twice as likely to be homeless as those who are returning home from prison their first time. That's startling. I'm already 36% more likely just in Stark County to go back. Add the layer of now I got 7 times likely to go to prison, be homeless, and 13 times more likely to go to homeless if I went more than once. More than once. Formerly incarcerated people are unemployed at a rate of over 27%. This is higher than the total U.S. unemployment rate during any historical period, including the Great Depression. That's equivalent to 1.35 million people who are system impacted that are unemployed. Research suggests that employers discriminate against those who have criminal records. How many of us are in HR here? Nobody? How many of us know our HR policies and procedures? We all should be raising our hands. But do you have a clause in your HR policies and procedures that talks about somebody who's been justice involved having to disclose that? Well, sweet, I'm gonna apply where you work at. I want to apply where you work at. Although employers express willingness to hire people with criminal records, evidence shows that having a record reduces employer callback rates by 50%. Half. Just by simply saying, hey, I checked the box, I am a person that has justice involved experience, 50% less likely to get a callback. In the period immediately following release, formerly incarcerated people are likely to struggle to find housing and attain addiction and mental health support. How many of us know mental health is important to our well-being? Awesome. Think about if it was challenging for you to have access to that. What happens if I show up to a site and you know what? Hey, my name's Stan. You hand me that tablet that you want me to fill out my papers on and stuff like that. I've been locked up 46 years. I don't know what that tablet is. Never seen that before in my life. I'm walking out. Because I just came home from doing 46 years and I don't know what that is that you just handed me. How many of us still struggle with technology? I do. And I'm a tech nerd. I still struggle. Imagine doing 46 years with no technology, not keeping up with the updates, not progressing, right? I think they still had bag phones at that point in 46 years ago, right? According to an analysis of IRS data by the Brookings Institution, the majority of employed people recently released from prison receive an income that puts them well below the poverty line. A study of job performance, though, this is encouraging, among call center employees found that individuals with criminal records had longer tenures and were less likely to quit than those without records. But we never thought of that they willing to stick with it a little bit longer. Nearly half, 49% of people with multiple arrests in the past year had individual incomes below $10,000. How many of us could live off $10,000? Okay, cool. Imagine being incarcerated for a tenure of time, and that's what you come home to make. In contrast, about a third, 36% of people arrested only once, and only 1 in 5, 21% of people who had no arrest, had incomes below $10,000. Essentially, what this means, if you have ever been arrested, statistics show you will more likely make an annual income below $10,000. Low educational attainment increases the likelihood of arrests, especially multiple arrests. I actually did a research on this. You know, 74% of the average working adult in Stark County can't read above a 3rd grade level. 74%. In Canton, Ohio, can't read above 3rd grade level. That's sad. 2/3, 66% of people with multiple arrests had no more than a high school education, compared to half, 51% of those who were arrested once, and a third, 33% of people who had no arrest in the past year. So 33% of people usually graduate with nothing more than a high school degree, a high school diploma. 51% of those who are arrested once have no more than a high school diploma. 66% of those who had multiple arrests had no more than a high school diploma. The nearly 444,000 people who cycle in and out of jail most frequently, this is 3 or more times over the course of 1 year, 12 months, in and out 3 or more times, demand special attention from policymakers. These individuals sometimes are called frequent utilizers. I put that in quotations because I think there's a more inclusive term that we can use, right? I call it system impacted. Repeatedly interact with the criminal justice system and with public services like emergency rooms and emergency shelters. You say, Stan, what the heck does this have to do with me? Well, there's a solution. That's my point of saying that. There's a solution. And Columbus, Ohio, is actually doing it. They have a program that's a wraparound called a Housing First program called FUSE that's helped to reduce the frequency of people being system impacted. It works. It works. 42% of people arrested and booked 3 or more times. 42% were black. I hope this is stirring something up inside of you. I hope that you're seeing the alarming statistics, because these are the reentry realities. Half, 50% of those most frequently arrested had annual incomes below $10,000, and 85% had incomes below 20. 85% of people who had multiple arrests had incomes below $20,000. Now, how many of us could live off $20,000? Could, but I don't want to. I like that. I could, but I don't want to. That's real. And if we don't want to, what makes us think that other people should have to? Educational attainment was lowest among people with 3 or more arrests in a year. 74% had a high school education or less, 38% without a high school diploma. People with 3 or more arrests were more likely to have been diagnosed with chronic health conditions compared to those with no arrest, including heart conditions, HIV, cirrhosis, and hepatitis B or C. The majority of people, 61% arrested 3 times or more, reported having a substance use disorder. Over a quarter, 27%, had a serious or moderate mental illness. What am I saying? I'm saying that incarceration plays a detrimental impact to every social determinant that a person has. Every single one of them. Maybe. Okay, there we go. So, what do we do from here? Some practical next steps for us to take as a community to bridge the gap for our fellow citizens. Now, my question to you is, what have you learned from these statistics? What can you do with what you have learned? By the way, if you didn't notice, that 16-year-old boy was me. in a courtroom being sentenced to 10 years. I now get the privilege of being a father, being a husband, being a homeowner. The reality of it is I work 4 jobs. I drive over an hour and a half to work in another community because my community won't hire me. I've applied for 264 jobs in the course of one fiscal year from January 22 to January 23. 2 people called me back and both of them denied me based on my criminal background. Those are reentry realities. So my question to you today is, what would you do with a stand? If I showed up and I asked you, hey, I'm looking for help, I'm looking for support, I'm looking for a job. I got 2 beautiful kids, 3 and 2 years old, and I got a wife who's depending on me. By the way, I'm the breadwinner in our home. I have to work 4 jobs to be that, but I get the privilege of being that. My wife was the breadwinner at one point in our journey of $19,000 a year. What would you do with a stand? Based on what you learned, educational issues, frequent utilization, homelessness, astronomically increased based off of being justice involved. Well, I'm glad you asked what you can do and what you can help with. Because guess what we're going to do? At our tables, you should see a piece of paper and some markers. My questions to you are, what can you do to change the realities you learned about today? What can you do specifically? How can you use your career to help make reentry successful for people like me coming home? Why would empowering people with lived experience benefit both your company, specifically, and your community? I ask my in-laws this all the time. They live in Bobolink, and I said, well, how do you think your community of Bobolink in North Canton, Ohio would benefit having somebody with lived experience on your neighborhood community board? Nobody could tell me. They didn't know. When does a person deserve a second chance? At what point does somebody deserve a second chance? I get it. I've done a lot of heinous things in my life. I've committed a lot of crimes in my life. And I'm not proud of that. I don't boast in that. I'm deeply remorseful for that. I work day in and day out to make reparations and reconciliation because of that. And why it was so important that my kids got the privilege to put a shirt and some shoes on me this morning is because I get the privilege of breaking a generational curse in my family of being a present dad in my household. My dad's 75 years old and still hasn't shaken the snares of the system, doing 3 years in prison right now at 75. I've been system impacted and justice involved since I was 10 years old for a fight in school. How many of us got into an altercation in school before? Whether it was a slapping match, a fist fight, whatever it may have been. Sure, we all have gotten into some type of altercation. Just imagine that led to you doing 36 days in a juvenile detention facility and 6 months on ankle monitor. And where do people who are coming home live? What are their options here locally? We all work in Stark County, right? We all do life in Stark County some way. Somebody came to your door and said, hey, I need housing. Where are you going to put them? Does anybody know about RHO and CTP here in Stark County? Good, good, good. That's one small slice of the pie. They have 11 options. That's it. 11. 11. What are you going to do with the other 2,700 people that are coming home? So I'd like for you, if you're not at a table with somebody, take a moment, get to a table with somebody. I'll give you about 2 minutes to do that. And I want you to talk about what you've learned today and what you can do with what you've learned. And I want you to come up in 5 minutes with some practical solutions. Sweet. Let's reconvene. Let's take a moment to get centered here. I heard some great conversations, so I'm excited to hear some of the innovative solutions that we came up with. I see some papers are still blank. I get it. I get it. We're still at the drawing board a little bit. Okay. Who would like to share some of the solutions that they came up with for Stan, who showed up at your doorstep of your organization? Yeah, please. Thank you.
The first thing that we have on our mind first is early intervention before they get released. Let's have them have a plan,
Like it.
okay? And then gotta have housing.
Love it.
So we're gonna get them involved with Shantae. She doesn't have room.
There it is.
Would know where to refer them to.
Yeah, absolutely.
Ohio Means Jobs has a reentry program.
Okay.
So we're going to get them involved there. And we need to be involved in the START program
Like it.
at Stark County.
Love it.
Peer-to-peer program, peer support. Yeah, mental health and addiction supports. And then the Reentry Coalition.
Love it. Love it. Love it. Let's give it up for them. In our core competencies as peer recovery supporters, we call that resource brokering. So great job brokering those resources. That's awesome. That's awesome. Who else would like to share? Did we have a hard time coming up with some? Yes, ma'am.
Actually said a lot that we did.
Oh, okay, okay.
And we have also hit on, there's a lot of issues with the programs that are available.
Come on.
I work at ICANN Housing. 90% of our programs are HUD.
Mm.
You have to be homeless first. So being in that 90-day facility doesn't work.
Talk about it.
Help you to get into one of our programs because you have to be homeless.
Absolutely.
And you can be couch surfing.
Come on. Come on.
Now, there are other options for housing prevention that tries to get to those couch surfers.
Yeah.
But then again, you gotta get to that, and the best we can do is maybe a security deposit and 1 or 2 months rent.
Come on.
Who can afford to pay $700?
Phew. Talk about
I'll
it.
be honest with you, I don't think, to this day, I can pay $700 in rent and all the utilities,
Come on. That's real.
and not be as tight as they are,
Yeah.
to be honest with you.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
Worked 40 years and still.
Yeah.
But that is one of the big problems, and that's HUD.
Yeah.
We don't have enough local programs.
Right.
ICANN has a workforce development team that we work with YW, with domestic violence, and our own programs.
Yeah.
But you gotta want to work.
Yeah.
You gotta want to, and there's avenues to education.
Yeah.
They just did the Ohio program that was through Walsh
Mm-hmm.
for manufacturing.
Yeah.
And, you know, you have to have the incentives, because anymore, nobody's gonna do anything without an incentive.
Mm.
And then you also have major issues of the benefit cliff. And we have a lot of people who will get a job, but as soon as they lose 1% of their food card or a benefit, they quit.
Yeah.
And when they have to pay 20% of their income, or 30% of their income, which if you think about it, can be as low as $10. We have an individual who pays $6 rent
Yeah.
and went 3 months without paying.
Yeah.
She had enough money for her cigarettes.
Yeah.
So it's working with those people in terms of teaching them where their priorities should be or can be if they want to get out of where they're at. And you can't do anything unless they want out.
I appreciate that. Thank you for that insight, and thank you for that feedback. Those HUD programs definitely have some limitations, and I think the point that you made was so eloquent, because you said I couldn't afford $700 a month in rent and paying all the utilities at this point. And so I want us to embrace the reality that they are us. You know what I mean?
Most of these programs, you get a maximum of 2 years.
Absolutely. And so think about, I'm already making $10,000, $20,000 tops. 85% of people coming home from prison make $20,000 a year. We talked about that statistic. And then you're asking me to also give you $10 a month in rent, cut my food stamps off. So I got to buy food stamps, because guess what? I got Uncle Joe, and I got Susie and Lucy and Jillian all staying with me because they ain't got nowhere to go. And they're my aunt and my uncle, and they just came home from prison. So I'm paying for food for them.
And most of these housings are only 1 bedroom and one individual.
There you go.
You'll be kicked out
Yeah.
if they're not on the lease.
There you go.
And if they do have income, then that means it raises your whole
Come on, come on. And so, you know, we have the multi-layers and the multi-facets, which I know our panel discussion is going to do a phenomenal job talking about how we can overcome that. And having resources like Shantae in the community are a huge blessing because they're solutions to those challenges. But then we add the convoluted challenge of, I was homeless before this, went to a system, not considered homeless, coming home, homeless shelter is full. Maybe I have an offense that I'm not allowed to go to a homeless shelter, and I don't have any essential documents, and you're telling me I got to get a job and lose all my benefits, and I can't get Medicaid now, and I can't get food stamps.
You can get your documents.
I agree.
ID is free.
I agree now.
And
That changed this year.
Half outreach, and we have an account with the DMV.
Right.
For, you know, documents.
Yeah.
That part has gone away a lot.
Yeah, but I think too, though, we got to realize that, you know, people are coming to Stark County or Ohio, and me and Stan had the privilege of working with him for a year, and we had a gentleman that was homeless, and he couldn't get a birth certificate from California. Right. And people, every agency in Stark County had tried for maybe 5 years, something like that.
Yeah, 5.
And it was extremely difficult for them to get it. And it took diligence, it took hours of me being on the phone or him to be on the phone. And so for most, yes, that's the case. But what about those in the cracks that they got to get out of state and they don't understand, or they don't have, you know, the knowledge or the patience to, you know, God willing, we were able to connect the dot, and finally after 6 or 7 years of him not having a birth certificate, he was able, you know, but he gave up, you know. I mean, he was tired of just trying and doors being shut and frustrated with people not understanding.
Was the problem California?
No, it was actually our problem because it was $90, and that is not covered by United Way. It was $90 to get his birth certificate over here. He also, when he was young, for whatever reason, they changed his name on his ID, and it was a K instead of a C, and this whole nuance happened, and so it ended up taking 90 days, right, for him just to get a birth certificate.
90 days?
90 days.
I mean, that part makes sense.
Yeah. In any event, though, I think the conversation that we're trying to like expound on is the reality that these resources are in place, but they also have challenges, right? And we have to acknowledge those challenges to be able to face the reentry realities. And so I want us to be able to dive into that a little bit, which is why I pressed a little bit. I wasn't trying to be confrontational in any form or fashion. I was just eliciting conversation because you had a great point. And I think the idea of this today's training was just to help us understand, instead of othering people that are navigating reentry, they're a part of our community. They're working at our grocery stores. You wouldn't know it, but I live in Market Heights. You wouldn't know that, right? Do I look like somebody who's navigating coming home from prison? And so that's the reality of it, is that, you know, they are us. And so walking with them through this is just like us walking alongside of our loved one or another community member. I have a neighbor, and I'll succinct here because I'm over time, but I have a neighbor who, she's an older lady. Her name's Miss Betty. I just call her Miss Betty. And she came over yesterday in the midst of my air conditioner trying to get fixed, and I had my AC out and had to deal with that with 2 little kids, a little kid who just had ear tubes put in yesterday. And so she came over yesterday and locked herself out of the house. And she found peace in a person like me who lived next door, who she trusted to help. Now, I wonder if she would have known that I did 10 years in prison from the age of 16 till I was 26, if she would have knocked on that door and asked me for help. Simply because of the stigma associated with them. But she seen me as us. And she seen me as part of the community. And so she's willing to walk alongside of me just as much as I'm willing to walk alongside of her. And I think in order for us to truly overcome some of the brave and hard realities of reentry, right? It's hard. It's hard. And so to walk through that journey with somebody, we have to embrace them as us, because they are just one of us, right? I'm just trying to be a father to my kids, trying to be the best husband that I can. I work day in and day out. People will tell you I work 70, 80 hours a week just to make $40,000 a year. With no complaints, with joy, gratefulness, honored. privileged, thankful that somebody would give me an opportunity. And I've stayed with this company. I drive 2.5 hours one way to Columbus every day to work. And so those are some of the reentry realities. But I've had people along the journey to come alongside, like Shantae, like Miss Smith, like Miss James, you know, and many other ones in this room, right? Aaron, Tiffany, have all been a part of my journey and have walked with me through that process and have been a blessing to me in many ways. And they've seen me as one of them. You had your hand up, I believe, over there. I'll open it up for questions too. Thank you. I appreciate y'all entertaining me for a minute.
It's not really a question, it's a comment. I actually had the privilege of going to Aruba last week.
Yeah.
And we were in the car, went with my kids and my grandkids and my sister and brother-in-law. And I said to my sister, I said, I have not seen any homeless people. and they were like, well, we haven't either. Well, you know, I was talking with her, and Aruba, their health care is given to everyone. They don't pay for health care.
Wow.
And my question was, I wonder what their health care covers for mental health.
Yeah.
But Aruba is also, I don't know the statistics of it, but it's also documented as one of the safest places to live.
Wow.
And I just, it gave me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
People, I didn't see anybody standing up with signs on the ends of the corners and,
Yeah.
And everybody seemed happy.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Absolutely. And I think that can be our reality. So thank you for sharing that, because what if we could make a little slice of Aruba right here?
Yeah.
Right? And maybe we just start with one small population of people to show that it can be done. Right? And to really start tackling and addressing the issues. Because I think on the other side, because that, I think, I'm sorry, ma'am, what's your name back there? You said something phenomenal about HUD. Laura, thank you. I appreciate that, Laura.
Finance director, so I know too much about HUD.
Exactly. I know that's. I've been on that side too, and it's not fun. But no, thank you for bringing up HUD, because one of the things that happens real ground time too, and they just passed something. They're working to pass a proposal to change these requirements. But something with HUD that's also been a challenge is that they require 5 years of no criminal history. Right? And so if I'm just coming home from a 2-year sentence.
Programs we have don't require that.
HUD doesn't require that you don't have a criminal background in 5 years. That's a federal guideline.
But the people we house?
I'm saying in HUD housing, the federal guideline, they just are working on a proposal to change it to 3 years.
We have 2 811 properties, and I could swear that there's not a guideline. I might be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, HUD.
That area, but I know that with our rapid rehousing and our supportive housing, I could swear there's not that guideline.
HUD actually has it outlined in their federal guidelines that it has to be. They just wrote a proposal. It's literally on. It's out right now, open for proposal, open for questions and comments, to change it to 3 years. As that's a innovative way to press against it. You could double check on HUD's website, but
It might be the fact of which programs we have in the homelessness.
It might be one of those like rapid rehousing programs where it's intervention immediately off of the streets kind of deal.
We do housing for homeless with mental illness.
Yep, absolutely.
I don't know how you could get 5 years with that population.
That's what we've been saying for years, since the 60s. But that's another conversation for another day, Laura. I do appreciate that, though, and thank you for the work that you do, because it's phenomenal. It really is. And I know ICANN Housing personally, and I'm grateful for everything that ICANN Housing has done for Stark County, for Canton specific. It's been a blessing, and I've seen people's lives change by that. But with that kind of being said, I open it up for any last-minute questions. I really want to honor and respect your break time. So, yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, I do have a question.
Yeah.
I know we talk about rehabilitation before exiting.
Yeah.
Is that improving moving, because everything we just talked about, if you don't have a continuity of care even before the door, how best can we as a community and organization and service meet that need when there's not the needs being addressed while you're in there to prepare to get out to reduce the recidivism?
It's a great question. I would say three things, right? Number one, I would say in prison, there's lengthy wait lists. So if I have anything over 6 months or anything less than 5 years, typically, I'm not going to get services because of the wait list. So essentially, you think about like somebody who's 6 months to the door. They're probably the ones who need some support the most because they're getting ready to go home. But because they're so close to the door, they're not able to get those services because the programs last too long. Then on the other side of that, if I have anything over 5 years, I'm way too far out that I'm not able to get into the programs because I have too much time. And this includes people that are a part of the parole board as well. If they're, close to going to see the parole board, they'll allow them access to the class, things like that, to put that on what they call their ORAS, which is kind of like the background information that they're given to. So that would be number one. I'd say, challenging those status quos, right? Like, why in the world is somebody not having 6 months to the door, not getting the support they need, right? We just asked a real life question. Who knows about RHO and CTP in here, right? And 3 people raised their hand. I counted because I work with RHO and CTP, right? And so the fact that our community isn't aware of that is something that needs to be addressed. If we're not aware of that, how much more so are people incarcerated not aware of that, right? And so that's the realities that we have to that we have to deal with, right? So that's number two, those systemic barriers and challenges and gaps, right? Like, there's no way that there's a housing program available that people don't know about, right? And then thirdly, I would say this is my mantra, and I'm screaming from the mountaintops. I think people with compromised backgrounds should be a part of the protected class. It would help with housing. It would help with employment. I think if we could get it on the ballot and we could vote for it, I think it would change the game. Because I'm here to tell you, I know right now, 70 million people are begging for a chance. The collateral consequences or sanctions that we call them here in the state of Ohio, and I'm sure Shantae will touch base on this, but they are astronomical. There were 1,700 different collateral consequences imposed on people after their sentence, added from August of 22 to August of 23. 1,700 different laws passed here in the state of Ohio, specifically imposed on people post-incarceration. Now, how many of us thought incarceration was supposed to be the sentence for the crime? But guess what? I'm still today, 7.5 years now, still being punished every time I apply for a job. Literally, my wife, who hasn't had a speeding ticket, couldn't move into an apartment because I was on the lease. My family members telling us, just don't put your name on the lease, but then we would be lying, right? And we'd just be like the rest of, quote unquote, them, right? Moving people in and doing what they gotta, we would be just like that. And so we had to wait essentially 87 days before somebody would give us and money wasn't the issue. I had 3 months rent, first and last month's, and security deposit. Literally trying to hand a landlord $5,000 cash to move in. But because of my background, maybe they thought it was dirty money. I had a nice, long, lengthy work history. I was a carpenter at that point in my life. It wasn't that. It was simply because I was considered a felon. So I appreciate that. That's real. Hopefully that answered your question. I gave you 3 specific ways, but there's many more. And I'm sure our panel will touch base on that and a lot more in depth later on. So thank y'all so much. Tiffany, appreciate it.
It's so hard for me to have these conversations because I am that dreamer, right?
Yeah.
Passion dreamer. But when I see this and hear this and know this, to me, like, the United States of America, like, we're far beyond a lot of things. There's no way that we don't know the solution. You know what I'm saying? So to me, the system is created and working the way it's supposed to, which is so discouraging to me.
It's hard.
It hurts.
Yeah.
Because it's not broken.
Yeah.
It's working the way it's designed to work.
Yeah. It's tough. No, I appreciate that, and thank you. I think there's a myriad of people who have encountered a lot more hardships than I have. I count myself blessed and truly privileged because of some of the comrades. I mean, even the injustices of being wrongfully convicted for crimes that people didn't commit, things of that, and still being held to those same things, by the way. I think those people are probably more warranted of an apology than I am, because I committed my crime. I'll be honest, I committed my crime, and I'm not here to try to, like, again, make face for that or any of that.
That's mine. You did your time, regardless of you did the crime.
Yeah.
You did your time.
Yeah.
And we all have done something. You know what I'm saying? So when do you get that chance, like you said?
Yeah, and that's what I'm here to have a conversation about this morning, because I think the change starts with us, right? And until, like, we collectively as a community see them as us, I don't think change is really going to help bridge those cracks, right? That the system kind of created over time. And you know, again, I advocate, I would say, put it on the ballot, put felons on the protected class. I'm telling you, it will work. It's working in Atlanta, Georgia right now. They did it just in the city, not in the state, so we could do it. And I'm telling you, we could change the game with it. People could get housing, people could get employment, people could have all types of rights. And in honor of Pride Month, I think that's exactly the innovation it takes, right? Is that people who belong to the LGBTQIA plus community, they've leveraged that. They've spoken into that. They've stood for that. And I think we need to too, as reentry. Creating inclusive places for people that are just as involved and system impacted the same way we do for LGBTQIA plus people. Because guess what? They had a fight that was worse than ours. Some folks lost their lives. And I think about Fred Tyson, who lost his life 2 weeks after being home. 2 weeks, y'all. On the video was his prison ID. That's the realities that we're faced with in reentry. So I hope that I wasn't too offensive or too abrasive. I pray that this was a communal conversation that helped leverage some innovation. And I pray and hope that you see me as an ally in your work, that you know I'm fighting for your highest good. I get the privilege of working with the Department of Justice, so I see firsthand those cracks in the system. And I'm doing everything I can to be an advocate, to be a voice for those in the system, because it's real. But it takes more than just stand. So that's my plea. Join me in the work. Join me in the work. Thank you.
You know, we in the social service get so frustrated because we do have these programs in place.
Yeah.
But what we don't always realize is that, you know, without a hand, without a come along, these folks who are coming out of prison is trauma.
Yeah.
They're in survival mode.
Right.
They're not able to navigate. A lot of them who have been away for a long time,
Come on.
they don't know how to navigate. Oh, they have to do an application on a computer.
Come on.
What the hell is a computer?
Exactly. It's real. It's real.
They're at such a deficit.
Yeah. Yeah.
And our expectations are clear up here.
Yeah. It's real. It's real. I appreciate you sharing. I'm well past my time. Please, everybody, take a moment, get you some refreshments, get you some water. I appreciate you so much. They were shooing me off the stage like the Apollo, so.
Take a break. We'll come back at 11:25.
So good morning, everyone. I'm Julia Smith. I am she, her A of pronoun, and I'm the diversity and equity coordinator with StarkMHAR. If you really have to introduce some family, I was like, I'm Julio, and you didn't introduce yourself. But your friend was here are made in the legal group of panelists. So we have some questions that are already pre-written, but I do want to make sure that we are creating a really safe and inclusive space in the room today. And so if anybody has a question, I just ask that you raise your hand and I will scooch my way on over to you. So our panelists are here today, and I just want to let everyone just do a brief introduction of yourself.
My name, turn it on. We didn't even turn it on. That was me. All right, mic check, cool. My name's Stan Frankart. I get the privilege of serving as the Licking County Coalition for Housing
Reentry Housing Program Supervisor.
Hello, my name's Delaney Green. I'm the forensic coordinator at StarkMHAR.
Hello, my name is Chaplain Kimberly Dove. I am the chaplain and volunteer coordinator for Indian River Juvenile Correctional Facility.
Hi, my name is Shante Metcalf, and I have too many titles, so I'm just a reentry specialist.
I'm Josh Hinkle. I'm an attorney with Community Legal Aid, and one of the teams I have the pleasure of working on is our Assisting Rare Citizens Project.
Thank you, everyone. All right, so I'm just going to start with a couple of the general questions. And so, like I said, in the midst of them answering the question, something else pops up, and then you wouldn't mind to raise your hand, and I'll make my way over. Let's see. What role do community-based services play in supporting the behavioral health needs of those re-entering?
So I definitely think behavioral health is a huge thing for people returning, whether you've been diagnosed with a serious mental illness, but re-acclimating into the community, you can simply have an adjustment disorder. It is a huge adjustment just to come back into the community. So we are always wanting people to seek those mental health services, whether it's counseling, case management can help people get back into the community as well. We have several agencies in the community that offer these services, but it's very important to be trauma-informed and know that these are clients that are coming into our doors, and just being well aware of that.
In and out. Big gate.
I'd just like to say I think that the role that they play is very important. I know for me, I'm working on bringing in more mentors that can work with our youth that, do have issues. And in reality, if we just be realistic, most people incarcerated have some type of issues. If we just talk about trauma, for me working with juveniles, a lot of childhood trauma, dealing with a lot of anxiety. So I think building trustful relationships with those that's working in that field is important, and it needs to happen before they re-enter society. We need to start working more. I'm working on a program from the inside out, and so that is, to me, what's going to be helpful, because when you have abandonment and trust issues and things like that, if people don't trust you, they don't even know if they can tell you what some of the challenges are that they're having even prior to re-entering society.
Yeah, I think the solutions that both Delaney and Chaplain Dove both shared are definitely part of the problem and can help, build that. I think the other thing that we sometimes forget too is that individuals who are separated from loved ones are considered to have been exposed to trauma. It's one of the leading indicators of trauma experiences, and that's what incarceration is. And so I think behavioral health services would be a key and integral part. And again, starting with the inside to the outside could be a tremendous help. I know Cleveland Clinic's done a study on something called post-incarcerated syndrome, which is supposed to be an arm of post-traumatic stress disorder. And so I would say it definitely plays an integral part to the process.
Thank you. Now, what personal stories or experiences have any of you encountered that highlight the importance of addressing behavioral health in this reentry process? Whether it's yourself, someone that you know, clients that you've worked with, anything. Because I'm a big believer on lived experience and sharing the story and the lived experience, because I feel like, yes, we do have here data, talk education, all these really great things, but hearing a story and doing that it's impacted right next to you, it is very, very successful, and it's very impactful.
That's a deep question. As I was sitting here thinking about it, as you asked, I think that a lot of times, like in transition, we call it, from one place to another, whether it's incarceration to freedom, whether it's homelessness to be housed, I think that it's important to realize that, like in my organization, my first thought process, and I think I learned this from Stan years ago, but like the importance of touching the soul of people versus the surface. We got to tap into that because, like she said, like Chaplain said, people don't care what you know until they know you care. And so we got to meet people exactly where they are at. And I think one of the things that we have to do and understand is like we got to take the stigma away from mental health. Like we got to make that a conversation that every organization in the city is having. Like the importance, if you dealt with any trauma in your life, like you're gonna have some sort of mental health. And so for our organization, I have a guy in our organization right now. He was like, I'm now getting to understand. He's been in my program for like a year. He's like, I'm now beginning to understand, like, it's okay to talk about the things I went through. I don't have to be afraid. I don't have to dive into drugs. Like I can just, you're the first person in my life, and I'm looking at like a guy like, you're crazy, bro. But he's like, you're the first person who took time out to listen to me and not just, truly hear what I was saying and understand like when I'm frustrated or the loss of my mom. I've been dealing with that for 7 years. And so like you made me see that it's okay to go talk to somebody. It's okay to even talk to you. And so I think like we got to look at individuals as individuals versus the problem that they're bringing or what causes them to go, to come to incarceration. Even myself, I mean, if I would have dealt with the trauma of me losing my mother in 2012, I wouldn't have spiraled out of control and went to prison. Like, none of my friends, none of my surrounding people were telling me, hey, you're hurting right now. You need to, this is grief. This is what you call grief. And I think a lot of individuals coming from incarceration, they need people to really pause from our day-to-day busy lives. Most of us in this room got 2 phones. And so like we need to put our phones down, really focus on the people that are coming into our buildings and listen to their heartbeat. Because that's a game changer. That's going to change their lives. That's going to motivate them to be able to say what they need to say, heal from the trauma, and begin to truly re-enter society.
So I think from my perspective, the clients I've had that have been actively addressing behavioral health issues are often more successful when they're dealing with their legal issues, whether that be record sealing and expungement or dealing with some housing issues. Oftentimes the clients that I see struggling, there is a mental health issue that's going unaddressed. And when it comes to legal issues, you got to be focused on it. And you got to focus on what is the path to resolve this. And oftentimes, those who are struggling without getting treatment to address it, it's hard for them to focus on the path that they need to go down to finish this legal issue, whether it means they get to keep their housing, whether it means their record is resolved. That it can be frustrating at times as their attorney, because we're their advocate, we're advocating for them, that we can see this is the biggest issue in your life right now, but due to what they're struggling with, they're seeing other issues and prioritizing those, which can jeopardize things like their housing. And so for those clients that when we're talking and they mention that they're connected with someone and they're addressing that, it kind of gives me a sigh of relief, because I can tell them all day, every day what needs to be done. But if there's an issue that's preventing them from seeing that as the main issue, it's not going to get resolved, and it's going to be harder. And so, like I said at the beginning, oftentimes those who have mental health issues, that when we see them come in as clients, if they're connected with a resource that's addressing whatever the issue is, they're oftentimes more successful at resolving their issue.
I just wanted to say, well, you said some great things. You used some of my key words, core, and she talked about listening. And I think one of the most important things is sometimes when we have a lot of clients, a lot of cases, we don't really take the time that's needed to listen to people. because a lot of times you won't get to the core or the root of the real problem that triggers even behavioral type responses until you listen. They'll tell you. And a lot of times I always tell, the people that I work with, if you listen, they'll even give you the answer to fix some things. So it takes time. Do we have the time? I work 40 hours, but I would say I probably work 80 hours because I'm always thinking and, thinking about what I can do. And I think that in order to really do work with people reentering society or working from the inside out, passion has to be your vehicle. You have to have empathy. If you don't have those tools, people can feel that. And we are spiritual beings. We do have souls. And just learning how to connect is very, very important. People are triggered by so many things. And so I'm always working not to be a trigger, to be more help than I am harmful.
Yeah, I think Chappie Dove said a great word, empathetic, right? And so, I think just realizing that there is a process in navigating that journey, and also realizing too that people who do have behavioral health struggles, they can recover. They do recover. And so having kind of a definitive definition of recovery helps. And Samson's definition, one that I found to be so helpful. And so I would say, just having the idea that people do recover, they can recover, and that people do live meaningful, self-directed lives that are striving to their fullest potential.
I'll stand because I'm short. I work with the 988 crisis line. So I have a lot of people that call in who are at their lowest. They've tried, they've been through the programs, they feel like nothing is going to allow them or anyone's going to allow them to recover. My question is, what not even statement, but what can offer any kind of hope when somebody is that far down because of their criminal background, their mental health share? We draw the past, the fact that they are at their wits' end and feel like no one will give them a break except for to recommit or just get.
I think it's extremely important to, when you're trying to build a community based on free entry, to have people in every organization that has lived experience. I think it's very helpful. I think when I can walk into a room or take a phone call with somebody who is in that state of mind of willing to give up, they're more likely to listen to what I have to say because I've been through that experience than somebody who they feel like, and I hear all the time, every day, somebody's calling my phone. They don't understand me because they haven't walked the walk I have walked. And so I think, to say that, just to educate yourself, when we are most uncomfortable is when we grow. And so I think if we're going to build a community, a successful community in reentry, we have to get in those spaces where you are coming to a reentry meeting, where you are coming to the houses that house people coming from incarceration, becoming very familiar with that, with these people, that's me, us, so that you can be more effective in the community. That's the key. That's truly the key, because it takes a whole village or a whole community to restore the souls of people coming home. They just need, at some point, I'm going to be effective. At some point, Chaplain's going to be effective. At some point, Dominant's going to be effective. But how do the Stark County we come together and we bridge that gap? As Stan said, there is, X amount of people who haven't been touched. It's going to take us being uncomfortable, unique, and, sitting down with one-on-ones with people from different organizations and saying, hey, this is my story. And when I'm telling my story, hopefully when you walk away from that, we share each other's stories, you become more empathetic and understanding of the path of which individuals are coming.
Yeah, I think Shantae cranked it out of the park. She hit the nail on the head with the cross systems collaboration piece. But I also think, too, to your point, a person-centered approach, right? Removing the stigmas, because we all have them, the biases, because we all have them, and being able to deal with that person as the person. Their issues are real to them, whether we believe it or not. To them, those being us, those issues are real. My AC went out, it was real, right? If your AC went out, it'd be real. If your car broke down on the side of the road, it'd be real. If you didn't have groceries in your refrigerator, it'd be real. And so being able to approach the people as people that are a part of our lives and embracing them and being empathetic with them and using analogies. One analogy that I try to always use, specifically when I'm dealing and working with people who maybe haven't been system impacted, I try to relate it to the reality of somebody being paraplegic, right? If somebody had a tragic car accident and lost their legs and had to become reacclimated to life in a wheelchair, I'd have a little bit more compassion and a little bit more empathy and be a little bit more inclusive. And so being able to walk us in those shoes, and I use walk very loosely, but being able to take a stride in that person's journey helps you become more empathetic, helps us become more compassionate, and helps us become more relatable. So hopefully that answered your question, man.
They had a question for Chapman. Since you work with youth and our juveniles, what are the most common mental health issues faced by our juveniles that are re-entering, and how can we address those?
I would have to say one of the most common would be PTSD, depression, and anxiety. Anxiety probably is more of a hindrance to them re-entering and being successful in that process. I was just listening to some of the speakers from different organizations and talking about some of the things that they're tasked with doing. That is overwhelming to them. It's not overwhelming to us, but it's overwhelming to someone that has been told what time to get up, what time to eat, what time to go to rec, what time to go to school, what time to go to programming. And then you come out and you're handed a folder full of resources and a schedule with nobody there to enforce that. And so that in itself is always anxiety. When I see, I worked in the adult system, a lot of different systems, so I might not be speaking just from my facility, but when I see people that come back, one of the main reasons is I couldn't take it. It was anxiety. They kept me on hold. Something that simple, being on hold for 10 or 15 minutes, and all kind of things are playing out in their mind can make people regress that has had all of this leadership structure, and now you put them out there. And that's why it's so important to me that we do build collaboration of people in the community that's willing to come on the inside and work with people before they get outside, so that when they get in a crisis moment, that we're available. And unfortunately, those crisis moments don't come from 8 to 5. So when I say available, we really have to be available. And what's going to make us want to become available is to come on the inside before they get out and get to know who they are. They are real people and good people that have been born or have lived in some pretty bad environments, and maybe they weren't as strong as some of the other people in the community. So I think that the stress and anxiety that brings about depression or triggers some of the trauma, and everybody has trauma. All of us have trauma.
Thank you. And I have a next question for Delaney. Delaney, what resources could support behavioral health providers, organizations, agencies that do with mental health, substance abuse, recovery, anything like that, in order for them to appropriately serve those who are just as involved and system impacted?
I think the number one thing is just training, being aware that Stark County offers a ton of trainings, especially these population focused. And we're also always wanting feedback from the community. If you're noticing something you're always running into and you feel like the community is not educated on that, we want to host trainings on that. That's something that we're really big on. So please, we don't know what's happening unless you tell us as well. So please let us know what trainings we offer. I think that's huge. Also cross-training. So someone who has, for say I have a social work degree, my education is not on legal terms. I don't know what parole probation terms are. And so being well educated on that, if you have someone coming in your office who's on parole, please don't make any promises that you don't know what their rules and obligations are for parole. So getting well educated, reaching out to legal services with any questions if you need extra education. So I would say cross-training is really big. Also knowing your limitations within your role and asking for help if you feel like that is also necessary. And then peer supports is huge. Tap into peer supports, tap into those individuals with lived experience. We don't want you saying things that you have. If you're not able to understand what they've been through, that's okay. It's okay to admit that and say, hey, this is someone I think you could connect with. They've gone through things that you have similarly have gone through. Would you be willing to talk to a peer? So utilizing those peers throughout our system would be really beneficial as well.
Seeing this shooting, so I'm going to swing that microphone down to Josh. Please tell me while you're talking about legal services. Josh, what are the best practices for integrating legal aid with mental health and behavioral health in general for those in recovery?
So, I mean, we were talking about like approaching from a point of empathy. I mean, the one thing as lawyers that we are very well aware of is we're not a very popular group. There's a lot of jokes about like, what do you call 100 lawyers at the bottom of the ocean, a good start? There's a lot of people in the reentry community. I mean, we saw it in the video Stan was showing of like, I need an extra $10,000 for us to do this, that have had a bad experience with a lawyer. And so now you're going, hey, you have this issue, let me get you connected to this lawyer. Well, if I've had a bad experience with a lawyer and now you're telling me I got to go deal with another lawyer, I may be hesitant to trust them. I may not even want to deal with them. And so part of that is really on us as the legal services to really meet them where they're at and build that trust. That's one of the biggest issues I've seen, and it's mostly because there are people that unfortunately have had terrible experiences with lawyers, and it sticks with them because there are, especially those in the reentry community, that have long consequences of that action. And so I think that's probably one of the best ones, is just meeting them where they're at. The other thing is just having an understanding about mental health, and just trying to work with your clients on that. I mean, I usually tell my clients, you can cancel on me a lot, and it takes a lot for me to cut you off. Like, I had a client a couple weeks ago who, I think this was like the third time we had rescheduled her appointment, that she's like, oh, my kid needs to go to the doctor. I'm like, yeah, just go. Like, we can find another time. Your issue isn't super pressing. It doesn't need to be done by this deadline. We can work with you. Now, if you can't tell me, don't tell me. I do get a little mad at that. But it's just making sure to work with them where they're at. That, again, I think in any service, we have the ideal client of we would like them to do X, Y, and Z. But the thing that I always point out is like, how would I be if I was my own client? I'd probably be terrible. I hate texting. I'm terrible at checking my personal emails, my work emails. I keep on top of it, but like my personal emails are terrible. So like if I had a lawyer that was sending me an email and texting me, I'd probably be horrible at communicating with them. And so really it's just understanding that everyone's going to be in a different position. You may have clients that had great experiences that trust you, clients that may have had terrible experiences and are hesitant. You may have clients that are dealing with a lot. And so just understanding their lives are chaotic, especially in the legal aid world. A lot of our clients are really struggling. And so they are juggling a lot. And so sometimes things fall. And just trying to work with them and make sure we try and help them as much as we can.
Since you've already took a point of working with them and you really knowing who they are, other than just seeing a client and what legal issue that you're working alongside of them, I want to have them just touch base a little bit on partnerships. Since you work in legal aid, are there any partnerships that exist right now between legal aid organizations with those that are justice involved?
Yeah. So we are on pretty much all of the reentry coalitions in our service area. So we serve 8 counties. We serve Wayne, Medina, Stark, Summit, Portage, Trumbull, Mahoning, and Columbiana County. To my knowledge, any one of those counties has a coalition, we're a part of it. In about an hour, I'm going to be driving to Medina for their reentry coalition. And so we are a part of those. And even on our other teams that aren't justice involved, we try and be active in those communities that have people doing similar work that we can each benefit by partnering together.
It's good.
Post.
And Shanti, I have a question for you. So you touched a little bit on this on creating an environment where people trust you. I think trust is really, really big. We can have all the resources, we can have programs in place, but if we don't have that aspect of trust, it can become pretty difficult. And I know when trust is understanding receiving the receiving end of it. And so how do you feel that societal attitudes towards formerly incarcerated individuals, how does that affect not only their own mental health, but also their success in reentry?
I think that I just wish sometimes that, like, being a justice involved individual myself, and as you get older and you grow, and I am so far away from me committing a crime, because no one catches cases, we all commit crimes to go to prison. I think that the scarlet letter that we have to wear coming home is tough, man. It's super tough for people who are trying to do the right thing. And the crazy part is, like Stan was talking about earlier, and he said I was going to touch on this. There was there was a lot of collateral sanctions that we have to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And as much as I advocate, as much as I go across the state and speak about it, I think the attitude towards us is crazy, because when I committed my crime and I walked into that courtroom, and I get emotional just thinking about it, and I stood in front of that judge, and I was looking at 28 years. By the grace of God, I only ended up with 3. And she said, I'm sending you to prison to rehabilitate yourself. And so I looked at the judge and I said, what does that even mean? I don't know what that means. What is rehabilitate myself? And so I took that time in prison to figure out what it meant. And so to rehabilitate yourself is to restore. And so I think it's so crazy that our society isn't caught up with the times where I was sentenced 3 years. I was sentenced probation or parole. But yet I still, after that time, have to jump to 50 million hoops in order to be respected as a person and not looked at as inmate 95673. I got to work 4 jobs in order to make $40,000 a year. I think our society is feasible. It's within reach. I mean, it's our community can do it. We don't have to wait on the country to do it, as Stan says. Like, Atlanta's doing things. Like, when as a community are we going to like stand up and say, hey, we are no longer going to treat these people like criminals. They are our community. These are citizens. They have done their time. They're doing everything. They checked every single box. And we're going to allow them to live in better homes. We're going to allow them to get careers in our jobs, because anybody can work at McDonald's. But we're going to allow these people to get careers, and we're going to treat them like human beings. Because everyone in our community is one mistake away from incarceration. Anybody in this room can be working multiple jobs, get super tired, fall asleep at the wheel, kill somebody, and get a vehicular homicide. So at some point, you know, like, we have to be above the bottom level and say, hey, Stark County is going to stand up, and we're going to start treating our people like people. We're going to start fighting for them. We're going to go to these organizations and, in a sense, demand that we treat our people like people, because they've done everything that they had to do. And now it's time for them to get that second chance, because second chance is not truly second chance in this country, especially not in this state. Did y'all see those numbers? I almost threw up. Like, Ohio is outranking all these countries. And it takes us going from this room and back into the community and begin to talk about things like the GROW Act, begin to talk about collateral sanctions, begin to talk about the importance of getting everybody who's in transition from incarceration, mental health and a substance abuse assessment, to let them know they're not by themselves. Like, it takes those things.
Thank you. I want to open it up and see if there are any questions. My name is Lindsay. I work as a mental health counselor, and I have some clients who are impacted by the justice system. I know you guys already briefly touched on resources and stuff, but in part of my role, you know, I really do focus on processing the emotions and the trauma associated with childhood stuff leading up to incarceration and trauma from being incarcerated itself. But, you know, I would like to be more familiar with what resources there are out there. So I guess I'm wondering, you know, if I were to advise a client of different resources that they could link up with, whether it's, you know, for housing, finding jobs, you know, free or low cost types things. And I guess I'm looking for more guidance of maybe names of different programs or even websites, things that I could refer people to.
Okay. So relinked.org is a phenomenal webpage that you can go onto, and it works all across the state, I believe. Am I correct? And they just tap in the city or the county or the zip code, right? And you put that in the system, and then it tells you all the reentry services that are available in Stark County. And inside that, we have the Reentry Coalition. That is a group of different businesses that come together that are dealing with people with justice involved. And I'm inviting everybody in this room to come join the Reentry Coalition. I'm only doing that because I'm the chair of it. But yeah, it's a group of community members that come together that have a desire to help people who are justice involved, and we bring our resources together to better the people in our community.
I would also say that Stark Help Central is a good website to utilize as well, and also calling the board if you have any specific questions about any services that your clients might need.
Stan, can you talk a little bit more about Refuge of Hope and just those housing aspects? I know that a couple people never knew that, but I think it would be a good resource just for everyone else.
Yeah, I would, again, Shantae has done a phenomenal job with the housing world, specifically in the reentry space. It's very low barrier, it's very informed, it's people with lived experience. I think if you have a housing need for an individual who is navigating that journey of reentering, I think Shantae should be your first call. The Reentry Coalition should be your first call for those kinds of services. And the reason I say that again is back to what Ms. Smith said, centering that lived experience helps create a supportive atmosphere, that supportive care is needed in order to walk with an individual who has very specific needs, who has very specific challenges that they've encountered, and being able to have somebody who encountered those same things is a blessing, right? It's a gift. I wouldn't want to go to a doctor who studied in school to be a lawyer, right? I wouldn't want to go to a lawyer who studied in school to be a dentist, right? And so being able to identify ourselves and saying, people with lived experience have a place at the table. I see Shantae is one. I think it's Coleman actually houses the Returning Ohio Community Transitions Program. So Coleman Professional Services, they actually have housing available for individuals who identify specifically as having been justice involved, severe and persistent mental illness, that's classified as a C1 mental health diagnosis in ODRC, or substance use disorder and having done some form of treatment in the institution, and then also people who identify as HIV, AIDS, and positive diagnosis. So they have to have been justice involved in the state penitentiary and have one of those three additional touch points. And then Refuge of Hope, I'd say ICANN Housing. I had a great conversation with Laura afterwards. Bring them our way. So I love her willingness to open the door and say, hey, this is an opportunity. And they have an outreach team as well. So I would say, it's important to look at resources like that. And then lastly, just some clothing resources, additional like clothing, food, things like that, because those are needs as well. I know 3rd Street Community Church has a place called the Closet of Jireh, and it's open to the public free. Nothing is charged, and it's gently or new clothes, gently used or new clothes. I know another organization, YCP, Young Christian Professionals, who I happen to get the privilege of being a part of, has resources available as well, like hygiene, and C2C Solutions is also a great partner in that. Can't for Own People has another resource as well. I could keep on going, but for the sake of time, I think that'll help at least get you started, man.
Additional question? I have some question. But I really think it's some time for everyone in the room to interact with the panelists. We are even step next. Shantae, how they are referencing the book you have available?
I am blessed and privileged to have 6 transitional homes across the city. So we help individuals who are just as involved get housing. We don't deter from anyone if they have a sex offense, arson, and I don't think I've ever turned anybody down. And so we have them on the northeast, we have them on the southeast, northwest, southwest, and we house both men and women, not together, but we have their several locations.
Okay, thank you. And then also, to reference your question, I'm with Star Community Support Network right on Harrisburg and Canton. We also provide support services, so it can be anywhere from like coaching and goal setting to we have food pantry every Wednesday and Friday from 11 to 1, a small clothing closet. So if anybody has any donations that they want to donate there. We also have like diaper supplies for people who need that. Some funding up in this upcoming year coming from StarkMHAR and things like client assistance funds. So just reach out because we try to support those who are justice involved as well and just try to be there to partner with them. And they have one site, mental health counseling as well. So we just have like a hub of services that they can just help get them started and we can support them as they go. We also have an emergency line that people can call after hours for crisis and we can get them connected to services. Our number is 330-455-2266. We're tag team. We're Tiffany and Tiffany companies. I had 2 questions about
I may just ask the one, what Chaplain and Doug. My question to you is, you talked about a lot of the kids in residential facilities or things like, or Indian River, are dealing with emotional or more trauma-based PTSD, anxiety. And so have you found that there were additional diagnoses that there is kind of like another touch point to some of the depression or some of the anxiety that would be more like learning disabilities, other things that are contributing factors? And I ask that because I work in the system. My husband and I are foster parents, and we actually get kiddos that are coming out of residential, and we're finding that they're coming in with, or we're learning about things that they're having, but there's another underlying that's occurring that we're seeing with our kids, that they're either, obviously they're kind of with depression, but I think more the educational limits that hadn't been diagnosed, learning disabilities that had been diagnosed, and we see some of that underlying where we're treating the mental health side, but we're missing gap a little bit on the educational side and things like that contribute to some of the behavior. So I don't know if that's something that you all are seeing or diagnosing more of, what have you. So that is an educational piece, but yes, I see it. Recently, I teamed with the Stark State, and some of the professors. Volunteerism is huge to me. Made a decision to volunteer to come in, and some of the youth that we thought were at a certain reading level, it wasn't that they had a second or third grade reading level, it was that they had dyslexia. And so those are very important pieces when we're dealing with youth that don't want to go to school. It's not always just because they don't want to go to school, it's because they have some type of learning disability that has been underlying and takes away their confidence. So those are things that we are working on, and having volunteers come in and spend that one-on-one time with them as far as those issues. But yes, it is definitely an underlying issue that can cause a lot of other things to happen. Thank you. I think I'll do this. That's some more shot. I'll do it.
Hi, my name is Joel Davis, and I work for StarkMHAR Training. And we do a lot of stuff with mental health and substance abuse, addiction. We got 3 induction machines. Mike Hagen, one of the last, one in Masters. And Deanna LeBaire, she mans the machine. She does a very good job. The other co-partner in the mail went here. I want to see them in the office in the morning, but I want to see them in the morning rest in the bed. So that's how work they work and how many clients that they deal with on a daily basis. And at 1:30, we're going to Polaris Court, which is basically how they got charged and they help people with mental health, try to invest in the child and show them some avenues to get out of that and not go back to it. On Thursday, they have drug court. And this is similar, but it's another avenue or chance to get their records exposed. So there's a lot of stuff in can. Stan, you was talking about between, I think it was 22 to 2023, when there was a lot of extra stuff added to people's time. And that was a very fast speed for that to happen. I used to be a waste collector for a sitting here. And not only without a waste collector, I basically monitor and see how people mind their trash. There's something that we can get really, really out there with. They got it a certain way, they want this, if somebody passes a lady way or anything away, I have limited that. I kept note of that stuff. And it's sort of like working with people. People come with a baggage of things, and we talked a lot about shared experience. Now, I come from a little bit of the old set. I'm 60 years old, and I started working in recovery when I was about 28. So things that happened back then, no, I ain't say that no matter how things change, things stay the same. No, the dogs. Because nowadays, there's a lot of different things with people. It's just talking into that. You know, I know people that carry around a medical card, Medicaid card in their pocket and you want to use it. So, my question is, if anyone knows it, if a person does not use or utilize their Medicaid that they have, it's just a loss or wash, or does that money stay or does it go somewhere else? I mean, the amount of people that don't, the people they do, because some people don't want to let a doctor understand that they don't find out something's wrong. Okay. Go to the eye doctor, go to the dentist, go to the medical doctor. It's just, there's a number of people that I know personally do not go to a doctor. And is there an avenue there to, I guess, to let people know that, hey, you got this in your pocket, use it?
So I don't know specifically about the funding of Medicaid, just because that's still way outside of my scope, but I'll just speak from a personal business. I know for me, everybody who's released from a state penitentiary is released with Medicaid. That's a known fact. And I would say for me, I'm just speaking for me, this isn't everybody's experience, but this is Stan's, that for me, I got locked up at 16, and so I didn't know how to use my Medicaid card. I didn't even know how to establish services, and I had no support system. My mom passed away when I was in prison, and so I didn't really have a wherewithal of how to navigate that journey, and the fear of doing something wrong or doing something incorrect and the repercussions of that hitting me kept me from even using it for services, because I didn't want to get penalized. I didn't want to get possibly criminalized for trying to use my Medicaid card and doing something wrong and then being penalized for that. So that was my personal experience. I work with men and women across 10 different counties coming home from incarceration, and I would say a lot of them don't know the services that they can get with their Medicaid services. And so I spend a lot of time advocating for people on the phone. I had one particular individual. She was 62 years old, to be exact, and is actually in 55 and over housing. And she had significant back issues, but she had previously been incarcerated for substance use disorder, and specifically the theft, child bullying, and drug abuse. And so because she had that on her record, instantaneously the people on the Medicaid side thought she was quote unquote doctor shopping. And so that's verbatim what they said to me. And said, you know, she's been trying to deal with this for years. She's been shopping around doctors for years. We're not going to give her, she needed a pre-approval to get a procedure done. And so at that point, she wanted to throw in the towel, but we kept fighting, we kept advocating, we kept continuing to find other avenues. And finally, she got the diagnosis, and it was actually, she had a very, very specific diagnosis of spina bifida that had been impeding her for years. And now they offered her pain medications, and she opted not to, simply because she wanted to continue her path of recovery. But those are just some experiences that I've encountered personally, as well as with individuals that I've walked with. So hopefully that helped paint a little bit of a picture for you. I don't know about the Medicaid answer specifically, though.
Oh, good.
Actually, I don't know what Charles was saying. When he came to the end of his conversation, he was talking about the add-on time.
Okay, I don't know, but does Ohio have prisons for profit?
Oh, absolutely.
So those two go together where all of a sudden tax is still on, but if we have prisons for profit, do you see what I'm saying? Can anybody address that? Because if we have prisons for profit and then you're taxing stuff on, what does that say about Ohio and our society, especially in the prison system?
So I'm glad you bring it up because those are real things. Anytime you privatize institutions, it's for the sole purpose of profit. The same way we privatize education and myriads of other things, it was for the sole purpose of profit. So the collateral consequences or collateral sanctions, those are those things that are imposed post-incarceration. Actually, the third leading gross domestic product here in the state of Ohio is the Ohio penal industries. And so you can research that. Medical is number one, nursing is number two, and then third is Ohio penal industries. And so I think that speaks to what you're speaking to a little bit more, is that, you know, what incentive do I have to fix something that's been designed to keep people going back and forth into prison? What incentive do I have because it's profitizing my pockets? I don't have an incentive because the incentive is already built into the system. So I think that's kind of what you're speaking to a little bit. There's a great book out there I would recommend everybody, if they had a chance, if they're readers, you can get the audio book as well. But it's by Michelle Alexander. It's called The New Jim Crow. The New Jim Crow. And it'll speak a little bit to this issue. There's another book, it's an academia book. So this is actually books that they use in universities. And it's called What Are Prisons Made For? That's specifically the title. I found that to be very helpful in my personal study of prisons. So hopefully that answered the question.
So y'all talk a lot about collateral sanctions. And, we know the job piece, the housing piece, but what other collateral sanctions be experiencing, and how do we advocate for that in our politicians, in our services, and what?
So take that one. He gave me that look like he wanted me to take that one. So, collateral sanctions, I'll give you an example of what a collateral sanction is. Came home from prison, started my own cleaning business, developed apartments, got a bid for that job. My cleaning service has a $5 million insurance policy. So I'm thinking to myself, I'm doing pretty good. I can go in here and break a couple things and be all right. And so I would fill out the application to get the property, fill out the bid to get the property for the bill. Made it to the third interview. I'm standing outside of my job, a sweaty t-shirt shop, excited that I'm about to get this big contract, a multi-million-dollar contract. Super excited. Lady calls me, she was like, yeah, I think we'll go with you. I'm like, yes, this is where it's at. I've been working really hard. She says, you got anything on your background? I said, what does that have to do with the price of tea in China? Mike's company is bonded, insured, like there should be no problem. And I say, yes, ma'am, I'm not going to lie. I went to prison for what I went to prison for. And she says, well, let me call you back. So she calls me back about 5 minutes later, and she says to me, I wish you would have lied. And I'm thinking to myself, what? Who said that to somebody? I'm like, even if I would have lied to you, you would have looked me up, and you would have found out anyway. And she says, because of your criminal background, we can't accept your company. You can't take the bid for the job. So that's what a collateral sanction is. And so these are things that are hindering us to better ourselves in the community or in our lives. And a couple things that we can do. I think there's over, how many collateral sanctions?
I think it was 2,300 last time I looked.
Okay. Yeah, like 2,300 collateral sanctions. And what you can do right now is, in the process right now, is this bill called the GROW Act. Extremely important. If you got a pen, please write it down. The GROW Act.
It's coming out in November.
It's coming out in November, and I'm working hard trying across the state speaking about it. But what it does is, if it is passed, I think we can get it on the ballot and it passed, it would allow 1 million, over a million individuals with a justice of all background to have their records sealed. And that's huge. It won't affect everybody. and you will have to meet the criteria, whether it's 6 years of no trouble or off of parole, off of probation, but after the criteria is met, your record will be automatically sealed. This is the buzz that's going on right now in the state of Ohio. It's important that we pass that because it's going to affect business owners. It's going to affect communities. We need everybody. I need faith-based. I need businesses. I need all of the above to go and push on the GROW Act. Yes, ma'am.
Is that only for certain charges?
So a certain degree, certain felonies won't apply. So my felony won't apply because I'm a violent offender. But misdemeanors, Josh might know a little bit more about the GROW Act.
I have looked into it too much. We've been focusing on another one. So with the collateral sanctions, again, just real quick, the employing ones also feed into the education aspect. So again, you can have these phenomenal rate education programs where people can get their education paid for, and they may have a collateral sanction that prevents them from working in that field. And so like a huge one is like anything in like the medical field. Again, we have some phenomenal programs to get people mostly paid for STNA programs, but if they have certain offenses that prevent them from being an STNA, they're stuck because they're not going to get their school paid for if they can't do the job. So that's kind of the other complicated thing with the collateral sanctions is the work ones also feed into the education, and it affects them there. The other thing, and it's not a collateral sanction in the traditional sense, but it is kind of one, is driver's license suspensions. And so this is the bill we've been kind of tracking, is there's a bill in the state of Ohio right now. It just passed the Senate Bill 37, is to remove the ability of courts to be able to suspend licenses on court basis. And that whole mechanism was created because it was thought to be, if you owe debt to a court debt, whether it be court costs or fines, they could suspend your license, then you'll pay it, then you'll get your license back. Problem is, for a huge population, the moment they lose their license, they're stuck with the choice. Do I lose my job? Or do I drive with a suspended license? If I have kids at home, kids are going to be hungry, so I'm probably going to risk it. Well, if you're driving and you're speeding, or your tail light's out, or your license plate lights on to get pulled over, not only are you getting a ticket for that, but you're getting a new criminal case for driving under a suspended license, which means more court costs, more court debt, and then another BOV block. And so you have those collateral sanctions, but then you also have this one because it really holds people back from moving up, because while like SART is great, SART only operates certain hours. I have a current client who we're clearing up her record that where it came from was her job that she had for a couple years. She had to show up to work at 3 a.m. There was not a bus. So she got pulled over for driving with her suspended license because I was tired. I was working 2 jobs, 3 jobs, and I'm going to work at 3 a.m. Well, I'm a police officer and I'm sitting on the highway and I'm seeing a car start to swerve at 3 a.m. I'm going to think, well, they might be intoxicated. Here she was just tired. And that added another kind of collateral sanction to prevent her from moving forward. But yeah, unfortunately, I haven't been able to follow the GROW Act too much just because I know that's a couple months out and I'm kind of focusing on the driver's license one because that'd be a huge access to employment for many people.
And just another thing about the GROW Act, if that passes, that brings jobs to Ohio. Something that we all know, like if the GROW Act passes, that means factories can come here and we can employ them and like we can build up the state of Ohio. So if you can, if you have time, please research that because it's important, for over 1 million people who are justice involved to have the sense of a true second chance.
Another one that we kind of touched on a little bit, just to add to those 2 specific measures being passed in the State House, is the one, I can't remember the exact number of the Senate bill, but it's specifically around essential documents prior to release. So yes, driver's license and IDs are free. Birth certificates are not. And some folks, unfortunately, are released homeless, so they don't have an address to send a social security card to. So those essential docs 9 months prior to release are critical, because they would essentially be coming home with all of the essential documents they would need in order to gain employment, to be able to go and get the ID, because you got to have those two things in order to have an ID, and then also be able to kind of go and mitigate any additional challenges that they're having in the legal system as well. So.
Hooray. Any last questions before we wrap up? Well, Aubrey, a round of applause for our panelists. Thank you everyone for your time, for your expertise and wisdom, and really, take this time, sit with it, there's still a few minutes left. You have an opportunity to do some networking. It takes a village, it takes everyone to be on a collaborative effort and approach to do the work that needs to be done, and all supporting and be an ally for change. So thank you, everybody.